I would like to introduce a man who is making games that you are not being able to play on a normal screen, not on a mobile, not on a console, not on a PC, but he's an expert in making hardware games and he will tell you everything about them. So please welcome Robin Baumgarten.
Hello. All right, yeah, so today I'm gonna show you quite a few of the little contraption I've been building. There's also one installed outside in the bar, which you can play after the talk. And in the first part of this talk, I'm gonna show you like a selection of different games, and then in the second part, I'm gonna talk through like how you can bring it from a prototype to like a maybe not quite super commercial product, but how you can earn some money with it, how you can show it, how you get the attention of like museums and festivals, or at least how I did it. So yeah. Okay, so let's see. This is me. I'm living in London and I used to study computer science, did mobile games while that still was possible. Now it's just too crowded of a market. And more or less accidentally I got into the experimental hardware scene basically, and I've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years now and making weird games. And I'm going to show you a few of them. So this is probably the first one I made. It's called A Dozen Sliders. There's only 8 of them because I was too lazy to build the last 4. But they're basically like these, if you know these high-end DJ pults, they have these motorized sliders. And it basically looks like, yep, like this. So they move about by themselves. They're touch sensitive, so if you touch them, they stop moving and they give you force feedback. And a series of little games. I made like one game which is like a inverse Flappy Bird where you control the pipes, and you know each color is a different pipe, so you can make it a multiplayer experience. Yeah, it was a good fun little experiment. I'm just going to go through a few of them quickly. This one is one I made during the Global Game Jam, which is like a 2-day event, and you'll see it brief in a second. So this is a conductive rubber band that changes resistance when you stretch it. So I have these little animated little bleb things that you can kind of throw up in the air and they go, ah! I don't think I added sound effects, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's quite interesting as well because in this one it looks quite nice to play, but it's very hard to showcase really because the rubber band breaks really easily. So if a kid plays with it and it doesn't know it can't stretch it too far, then it just snaps. It's a bit tricky, but it was a cool experiment. This one is a game without a screen. It's called Schrödinger's Litter Box. You need to find an invisible cat. I'm gonna turn down the volume a bit, maybe. Oh, yeah, perfect. And the closer you get, the more your glove vibrates. So it's a vibrating glove we built. We put some vibration motors in there, and you can also see the little flashing lights just for the audience. So once you're close enough, and you found the position of the cat, it starts purring, and in a second, yeah, there it is, perfect. And actually we made this game on a train, so this is called the Train Jam, which is a game jam taking place entirely on a train from Chicago to San Francisco. 52 hours trapped in a train. This is, it's been going on for a few years now, this event, and this year it was only game developers, so we sold out the entire train full of nerds. It was quite fun. So these are the vibration motors. You can see the making of here. Bit of sewing. Yeah, it's quite fun to try to do that on a moving vehicle. Like soldering is quite dangerous, but it's fun. Yeah, touch panel. Okay. The next one is a bit more dangerous. It's a game with a knife on a motor, and you're supposed to hold your fingers in the path of the knife. The idea of the game is like it's a collaborative game, so it's 3 buttons, 3 players, and you have to keep holding all the buttons as long as possible without touching the knife. The knife is also touch sensitive, so when it notices like a finger, it just cuts, like it starts moving back and forth really fast, trying to cut you, like this. And yeah, you need to fill up this bar, and then the knife moves faster and faster. It's pretty fun. I mean, this is not a commercial game. It's kind of tricky to sell, I guess. I did show it once at EGX Res in London, so kind of flew under the radar. I think I didn't need to sign any waivers or health and safety forms. But also, I would like to say by design, but kind of by accident, the blade isn't sharp enough to cut skin, or at least it hasn't yet. It looks sharp, and that's quite the interesting. Like, it's an interesting thing to work with pain or the expectation of pain, especially in the audience, because they don't know how sharp it is, and it does look quite sharp. It's called Knife to Meet You. If you didn't see, it's like I love my puns. Yeah. So this is actually the game I'm working on currently. It's called Wobble Garden. This is the first prototype I built, so it's just like, you can see like a lot of LED strips. Oh, it's just one long one, wide around, and it's like doorstopper springs. So like these are all springs, and they have these little sensors. You can see them down here. This is the first prototype, so it's not fully working, which is kind of a proof of concept. And a few weeks later, it looked like this. So it's gonna be, it's hexagon shaped now, and each of those springs is vibration sensitive. So you can see these cool waves coming out of it. You can't quite estimate how bright they are in a video, but they're quite bright, and there's like a different modes for it. So this is the one I showed most recently at a Maze Festival in Berlin, which is an independent games festival. It's like a finger twister game. So each player has a color, and you need to touch all of your colors, and it's like a bit mad to play, but it's also touch sensitive now. So it's like a vibration and touch, and it looks quite cool, and it's kind of weird and springy. It's like a sound demo. It's different modes for it. So I want to make it like that's like lots of different experiences on there. And then it's like a single player game where you walk on the wide area, so it's like a dungeon crawler almost. Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of concludes the first part of like a kind of tour de force of my games. There's one more game called Line Wobbler, which I'm going to show you in a minute here live, actually, which is so far by far my most popular game. But first, a little interlude about hardware games in general. So hardware games are really hot right now, especially if you hold the soldering iron the wrong way. But also, they're easier to use than ever. There is a lot of kits to make it simple. So for example, the makey is just the thing where you connect one end to like something that conducts, like a banana, and the other one to the computer, and then the banana becomes a keyboard. So you can play with 4 bananas, you can have the arrow keys, and it's super simple to use. You don't need to know any programming knowledge to make an alternative controller. And then it gets more complex from there. It's also very cheap. So like the Raspberry Pi, maybe you have heard of it, like one is very cheap, like $4 for a full Linux computer. Easier to buy online or in China for cheap. The hardware is getting better, also like more like faster and more professional. I like a thing called the Teensy. That's a specific Arduino. I might talk about it later if I have the time. There's a lot of Kickstarter devices for all kinds of different things, and like, connected Internet of Things and all this, different applications. And there's larger communities as well. So like I work from, I don't have an office or anything, so I work from the Makerspace in London, which is like a space, like a communal workshop where you pay a monthly membership fee, and then you can use all the machines like 3D printers, laser cutters, wood workshop, whatever, and they teach you things as well. And online as well, so like forums, they will guaranteed to have had the problem before that you're trying to solve, so you just can look it up, and it's very quick. So the next question is like, maybe where can you make these games? So like there is some game jams that are like, or like some events that are tailored for these kind of things. So like, for example, there's sadly not happening anymore. Like there was a Zoo Machines event in France, which was really cool. It was a lot of weird games come out of there. I made the knife game there with 3 friends, so it's good fun. There's a thing called the Alt Control Game Jam, which is dedicated to alternative controllers. That one is a bit weird because it is entirely online, which is not ideal if you're making hardware games, because nobody can actually play the games. But it's a worldwide thing, so it's like you need to upload a video. So it's a bit of compromise. But obviously you can make them at any kind of event. So as I mentioned earlier, the train is one example. So this is like my workspace on the train. It's an American train, so everything is a bit bigger, there's more space, so the tables are larger. So it's a lot of space to make these little things. You see LED strips lying around here. People looked a bit funny when they saw all this hardware, but so far I didn't get any kind of weird bomb warnings or something. So far, so good. But yeah, so at one of those game jams, I made a game called Line Wobbler together with a friend, and I'm briefly gonna wait. First, I'm gonna ask who doesn't know what Line Wobbler is or hasn't seen it yet. Can I get a quick raise of hands? Okay, maybe like half. So I've got it here. It's a one-dimensional game. So it's a one-dimensional dungeon crawler, and I need 2 hands to play it. So I'm gonna have here my assistant holding the mic. Okay, let's see if it works. Yeah, looks good. Aha, yeah. So this is a game entirely played on this line of light, and you can see you control this green character here, and you have this spring joystick, which you can move back and forth. There's obstacles like these enemies, so if you touch them, you lose, and it's a kind of this nice death animation. But you can attack them by wobbling the spring. So it's inspired by these door stopper springs, which you can kind of find on doors. I'll show you a video later. And the goal of this game is like to reach the other end by defeating all these obstacles. And there's like 10 different levels. They get harder and harder. Looks like this. Yeah, as you can see, it's quite bright. So it works really well in like dark environments. And it's brighter than a normal screen. So I really enjoy this kind of more vivid experience. And also the frame rate is really high on this game. So it's over 120 frames, which is a bit more than necessary, I think. But it's I quite enjoy having this super smooth effect of you know, like the animations, like especially when you die, it looks kind of nice and smooth. It's almost too pretty for a death animation, but yeah. And well, there's 10 levels. There's a boss fight in the end. There's different obstacles. Okay, maybe I'll show you the next one. Oh, no, I think I just crashed it. Okay, yeah, but you can play the game over in the bar as well. So it's gonna restart, yeah. So maybe that's enough for a short demo here. But yeah, so you get the idea. There's like these kind of cool sound effects. You probably heard them, but I'll... So they're all generated sound effects. So they're very simple sine waves that I just kind of make with a higher pitch when I bend the spring. That's all how it works. So it's very simple in the hardware, but when me and Matthias made it in this game jam, it was like 48 hours. We had the first prototype. Obviously, it wasn't as kind of complete or long back then, but people said, this is really cool. Maybe I should show it at more places. So I decided, okay, I'm going to pitch it to all different festivals that I can and see if people really like it or if they've just been good friends. But they seem to really like it. So I'm just going to go forward in the slides as well. So yep, that's what I'm going to talk about. So like the inspiration, the iteration through exhibitions. So there was like a lot of things that kind of kept breaking in the game and how I've had to fix them. And then I talk about how I took this from like the prototype to basically installation art. Yeah, this is a picture of the first prototype. Basically made at a game jam in 2.5 days. So it's a very short thing. So, but it already had the sound. You can see it's like shorter. It's like 1 meter. You can't really see what's going on. Because it's so bright. The camera just overexposes. This is the inspiration. It's a video on YouTube about a cat playing with a doorstopper spring. And it's unfortunately not my cat. Or maybe fortunately, because apparently this cat does it every morning at 5 a.m. But yeah, I was very inspired, like saying, oh, even like animals enjoy this kind of tactile feedback of moving springs and the sound that comes with it. So I said, oh, maybe I can make this into a controller somehow. And then I spent some time figuring out how do I actually measure how far you bend the spring. And what I ended up doing is I'm using an acceleration sensor. So in the top here, is an acceleration sensor. So I measure basically the direction of gravity. So it doesn't really matter if I bend the spring or not. It's just like, you know, bending the entire joystick or like moving the entire joystick controls the game. And that works much better than expected, actually. So I could make the game much more detailed, and it's like a very fine-grained control. But these limitations, again, I was clear I wanted to use a spring and the spring only. And also we had this limitation. Okay, we want to use like a LED strip that kind of informed the game by itself. So there was no additional kind of pretty much thoughts required to make the games. Like we said, okay, we can make a game on an LED strip and we use a spring. So let's test the spring movement. So the first thing I wrote is like a little debug point of light that when you bend it forward, it moves forward. When you bend it back, it bends back. And then when you let go of the spring, it just kind of shook back and forth, like fairly violently. Said, okay, if it's violent, maybe it's an attack. If it's an attack, we have enemies. So the game kind of presented itself out of the limitations of the hardware, which is was quite cool. And I've been chasing this kind of quick, like turnaround ever since. So like this was a one-off experience where like, oh, the game was there right away. And it's not always that it happens, but in this case it really worked. And so we kind of just went all in. So like what other mechanics can you have if you have movement in 1D? Just kind of pushing around. So there's like a conveyor belt mechanic, or there's like a time-based mechanics, like a lava field, which goes on and off. So you need to kind of wait. Actually, see this is like the instruction sheet I give with the game. Yeah, and so it's also, because it's 1D, I mean, it does exist in the real world, so I embed it in the real world. So like every time I show it, I try to change the layout a little bit. So this was at Amazing Berlin like 3 years ago, and it went over there, actually a bit over the heads of the players, and so they all had to kind of look up and kind of hurt their necks a little bit. So that was quite fun to do, and like really unusual for a video game that people had to look up onto the ceiling. And I really enjoy this kind of interaction of a video game with the existing architecture. As another example, this is Zoom Machines again. That was inside another kind of installation piece that was just standing there, and I kind of just installed the game in there. It's like a spiral shape. This is the biggest one I've built so far. This was in collaboration with Games London, and it's a Christmas tree at King's Cross Station. So this was this December, also last December. And it's basically 25 meters long version of the game. So you kind of play this. It's the same type. You can see the green light moving there, and the little enemies. I needed to obviously adapt it a bit because like otherwise it would just be too stretched out. But it was quite a challenge to get like the electricity up and the data and to make it still look smooth. But that was a really cool concept, and I think I want to kind of go more into this installation art angle now. So like there's a lot of Festival of Lights and so on that have this. This is underwater. Actually, also the game has like an autoplay mode. So like if you don't play it for 3 minutes, it starts playing itself. So it's like in a track mode. It's very distracting for everyone, but I can just leave it running because like, it's just the video is the same thing anyway. Oh, it makes it let us fall over. But yes, the underwater doesn't really change much. But it was kind of cool. It was at my parents' pond, so it attracted these animals. So like this little newt there. Yeah, I call him Tiny because he's minute. Yeah, these are the parts that I used for Line Wobbler. It's not really that interesting. It's just like if you kind of want to look into doing the same thing. So this is these tiny chips here that are the brain of the game. So this is a very small Arduino. So it's like a basic mini computer that is very well equipped to talk to LEDs, buttons, anything. And it's very fast as well for an Arduino. It's like it runs at 100 megahertz, which is respectable for a tiny chip like this. These are the accelerometers. These are the LED strips here. I buy them from China. Yeah, and the rest is just soldering, basically. But yeah, one big problem basically was the durability of the game, and I think that's a general problem in hardware games. So at first I used this spring, which is a doorstop spring, but it turns out, especially even kids use it, and these are this was in Italy, and Italian kids are especially good play testers, I would say, stress testers. I don't speak any Italian, they don't speak any English or German, so there's no way to communicate. So the game was on its own basically, but it did survive, but only just barely. So the springs are way too weak, so they kind of start bending and staying bent, right? Non-elastic bending. So I needed stronger springs. So what I did was I tried to use these shoe tree springs, which are springs that like these are from my grandma, and she used them to stretch her leather shoes. I know maybe I've seen this. But yeah, that was quite nice, but it's kind of hard to use. It's kind of difficult to attach it to a table or something. So what I ended up using, I had a custom spring made for me. So I found a spring factory, and I talked to them and said, I want to build this video game. And they went, what the hell? We make springs for doors and cars. What do you want? But after a while of talking, they were kind of into it. It's like, oh wow, this is cool. Like our spring is like the centerpiece of this game. And so I learned all about these weird spring characteristics, about like, the ratio of the overall spring diameter versus the steel diameter, and like the oscillation frequencies, and as spring steel, which rusts, but it's much better. But I can't have rusting, so it's like stainless steel, but it's not quite as nice. So there's a lot of, like I had like a lot of like different size springs made for me. And then in the end, I ended up with this one. And I have a little video here of the spring being cut for me. So this is actually the spring that is in, well, I mean, not this exact one, but this is exactly the type of spring that is in here. So you can see this is the base. So I don't know if you can see it from the distance, but this is how it's attached to the wood. And then it comes out. It gets a bit thinner to the top to fit in the knob, and then it cuts it off. It was quite nice to watch. And then yeah, I had 50 of these springs laying around. It's not that expensive either. It's it turned out to be like about €3 per spring in the end. So it's not too bad. I mean, especially if you make many, because like a lot of that cost was the setup cost of this spring robot, because that costed, I don't know, a third of the money was just the setup, and then per cost was fairly cheap. Yeah, these are the springs. These are little helpers in our hack space, testing the game. I think at one time I want to make a game entirely run by cats, so I put some catnip in the controller, so the cat plays with the joystick, and while the other cats chase. Such a cute cat. That was fun. Yep. So where do I show these games? So there's like a few places you can show these. The most popular one probably these days is called Alt Control GDC, and it's part of GDC, which is a game developer conference. It's in San Francisco, and they have this dedicated area for hardware games, and they don't really need to be super finished or like polished, but it's like the weirder the controls, the better. And they accept all these, they specialize on these hardware games. But from there on, you can go to more general exhibitions. So I call it the museum progression. So you start at these specialized events like Alt Control, GDC, which I just mentioned. Amaze is an indie festival in Berlin. It's Fantastic Arcade in the States. And from there on, when you've shown it a few times, you can show it, although you just show it right away at more normal game events. So the Tokyo Game Show, they have shown hardware games before. Gamescom is the biggest one in the world in Cologne, and so on. And when you've shown it there, there's also more general arty events. So music and film festivals, I guess like this one, are also kind of more interested in this kind of interactive art and video, like experimental games section now. So for example, this one was in the Cluj Festival in Cluj in Romania. That was really cool because it had this really cool lighting everywhere, and then it was like this kind of really bare building with electronic music everywhere. So it was kind of a really cool setting, like a Blade Runner style. And the game looked really cool in there, so I had a lot of cool photos from this event. And it was kind of nice to go and show it in a different environment. Yeah, and then there's a museum specialized on that as well. Like there's the Game Science Center, for example, in Berlin, but there's also a lot of kid museums that are kind of super into that stuff. Yeah. So another way to show these games or make these games is also to run, there's 3 ways, basically, or at least 3. Wait, let me just stop this. It's too distracting. There's small-scale installation art. That's what I'm doing, basically. I just kind of have a couple copies of this game. So there's about, I forgot the exact number, but it's like 40 copies of this. And I rent them out to museums and festivals, and they pay artist fees. And depending on the size of the museum, it's more or less. The biggest show coming up is in the V&A. That's the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and they're doing a big video game design exhibition from September. So that was like the biggest exhibition I will show the game so far. And yeah, they asked for 3 copies of the game, and being a big museum, they pay a good artist fee as well. We can talk about extra numbers later if you want to talk to me in person. I don't know if I can just shout it out to a room like this, but that's. I basically have been doing this for the last 2 years or so, and right now it's enough for me to live off these costs. But I don't know how much that keeps going, So that's what I do now. But another option is to license it out to toy companies, for example. So I know, for example, Hasbro is always interested in independent inventors. But then obviously it needs to fit their IPs, you know, like it's all about IPs for these big companies. So if it, you know, if they can make Spider-Man work with your game, then you probably have a hit on your hands. But this is way too abstract, so I think that wouldn't work. Maybe Pac-Man, I'm not sure. So I did actually talk to Bandai Namco, but they were also confused. So arcades is another one, although it's not too big anymore. So there's still an arcade scene in Japan and the States. So that's another option if your game kind of is arcadey like this. And obviously Kickstarter and mass production. So some good friends in London did that recently with a game called Beasts of Balance, which is a kind of hybrid game, a board game and an iPad combination about stacking things on a Bluetooth scale. And so the scale is connected to the iPad. And they were very successful with their Kickstarter. So they went to China afterwards to mass produce it. It's kind of a lot of effort, but it paid off for them. But I'm personally not interested at all in this Kickstarter stuff, so or the China. So for now, I keep, as long as I can keep doing this with like this experimental stuff. Yeah. Oh, that's already everything I had to say. So thanks for listening. So you can try the game over in the bar for the next 2 days still. But first, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Are there any questions?
Just raise your hand and I'll come with mic. Anyone? Come on, guys, don't be shy.
Oh. Hi.
Hey.
Do you try Crossroads?
Crossy Roads?
Yeah.
On this? I haven't tried it. No, I should see if that is possible. I mean, it's a bit harder in 1D, but I've tried a few different games on like a 1D demake of the games. There's like a golf game I tried to do. It's quite funny. But a lot of the games, they don't really work that well in 1D. It's like then maybe they're fun for 10 seconds, but then it's like too limiting to have only color and direction. But yeah, it's definitely a space for more games. So if you have ideas, feel free to either make them yourself or tell me, and I might make them as well. But yeah.
Thanks.
Another question there in the back.
So when you bring the game into like different contexts, it kind of changes how you play. Like if you have it curled up, it's a lot more. It's just a very different kind of game, right?
Yeah.
Have you? So obviously you had the kind of King's Cross Christmas tree type spiral thing, but what other sort of contexts or structures do you think you like? Straight away in my head, doing a game where you maybe were holding the controller and having to walk around an object to track it, and you couldn't see it from, would be like totally different game, but with the exact same gameplay. Like, do you have any other kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good idea that that could work really well, like different rooms. So you need to kind of go through a house where like a really long LED strip, and you have a portable wobbler. That could work really well. Another idea I have is I really want to scale it up massively, so like have it on like a tower or something, or like a massive building, so like like the tallest game in the world or something. So that could be really cool. And then you need to think about like, would it still make sense to have it in an LED strip or some kind of laser projection? There's also like an endless mode I want to build, and like maybe have like a circle in a room, like this is like a circular room, so that could work. And then you turn as you play, and it reconstructs the level behind you, like in a procedural way maybe. So that could be, there's like a few ideas. Multiplayer is another one I need to tackle at some point. It's been requested.
Any other questions? Well, then thank you for a talk. Thank you for your time. And we'll continue in 27 minutes and with our first film of this day, or of game days. So see you soon, guys.